Welcome to War Support. War Support is an action puzzle game where players will draw a flight path to help refugees survive an enemy occupation. War Support will utilize a 2D top view using 3D objects. During play, players will draw flight paths that will guide the helicopter through one flight. This will decrease the distance meter, limiting the travel of the helicopter in a single flight. The player will then tap the helicopter to begin that flight. This will decrease the number of available flights in a level. The helicopter can only make so many flights per level, leaving the player to solve the puzzle of how to reach all of the refugees before they run out of flights. The first refugee that is reached is requesting to be picked up. When this task is completed, the pickup icon is increased. The helicopter only holds a limited number of refugees in one flight, and the number will reset when the helicopter lands on the landing pad. When picked up, the refugee will award the player with an extra supply drop. This will help the player as the levels become more difficult. This is because the players will not always start a level with enough drops to complete a level and will need these extra drops to be successful. Every refugee helped will increase the refugee counter, and to complete all levels, all refugees in all levels must be helped. The next refugee in the flight path is requesting a food drop. The helicopter accomplishes this task, the number of food drops is decreased, and the refugee counter is increased. While the helicopter is moving to the end of the flight path, the action portion of War Support comes into play as it moves in range of an enemy missile turret. The turrets will fire missiles at the player for as long as they are in range. As missiles hit the helicopter, it will sustain damage and lose health. The helicopter has no weapons to fight back with. To avoid enemy fire, the player can tap and hold the turbo button. This causes the helicopter to move faster, but will cause the engine to overheat. The longer the button is held down, the faster the engine overheats. Overheating the engine will cause the helicopter to move very slow. The engine will cool when turbo is not in use. As the helicopter reaches the end of the flight, it helps the refugee requesting medical supplies. The number of med supplies is reduced and the refugee counter increases. At the end of the flight, the helicopter takes the shortest path back to base. If this takes the player through enemy territory, they may decide to use the turbo to quickly flee missile range. Once back at the base, the distance meter will refill and the next flight can begin. There are two ways to fail a level: running out of health and running out of flights without supporting all refugees in the level. The levels are pass or fail. If players solve the puzzle in less flights than they have available, they will be rewarded with extra drops to assist them in the next level. As the levels progress, the layouts will increase in difficulty, adding refugees at greater distances with more turrets and less resources to start with. This will cause players to strategize and adapt as they try to avoid enemy fire and support refugees. Comparable games include Stellar Fox, which uses drawn lines to bridge gaps, and Air Patriots, which uses drawn lines to navigate planes. War Support differs from these by limiting the number of attempts and distance of each attempt available to complete a level, and adds limited resources used to complete those levels. The developmental risks involved with this project is that the helicopter and enemy missiles require a specific and fine-tuned animation to make their movements in flight look natural. The 10 puzzle levels of the game will need to be built by hand and will need to be designed in a way that provides an incremental challenge as the levels progress. Both aspects will take time to perfect, as well as balancing the number of refugees and supply drops in each level. I want to thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the air.